At AV&R, our mission is to humanize robotics. We decided to create this podcast series to help you demystify the world of robotics and discover what some of the brightest minds in the field are doing. Welcome to Robotics for All Podcasts by AV&R.
In this episode, we're excited to welcome Tim Kubista, the leader of the sales and marketing team at RC Mowers. Tim brings over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategy, and market expansion, and is laser focused on the customer experience and the commercial mowing industry. We dive into the topic of their newly launched autonomous mowing robot and its impact on commercial landscaping. Tim shares insights on how the robot works, the benefits it brings to the industry, and addresses misconceptions about their mowers. We also take a look at the future of robotics in various industries and make predictions on how the labor market could change over the next few years. Tune in for an enlightening conversation on the cutting edge of technology and the future of the industry. Hope everyone enjoys the show. Here we go. Hi, Tim. Thanks for joining me today.
Yes, it's great to be here.
So tell me a little about RC Mowers and what you guys do.
Sure. So we're maybe a 4.5-year-old company. And we only have two products, both in the lawn and landscape space. One is a remote controlled robotic mower that's used to mow really extreme landscapes. Think of like really steep hills, hazardous terrain, places where it's really unsafe to put a person on a machine. And then our other product that we just introduced is a autonomous mowing commercial robot. So it's designed to take your 3-person commercial mowing crew down to a crew of 1, but yet generate the same amount of revenue.
Great. When I started looking around on your website, I was pretty intrigued. You know, you're not that old of a company, but yet you seem to be going through a great growth and expansion. Tell me about how the market's responded to these type of lawnmowers.
So really very good. So just so your audience is clear, these aren't products that are meant for consumers or homes. These are products that are purchased by businesses or governments to do large scale work, because they are expensive products. So I think that something we've done really well is a very well-balanced company in terms of talent and strategy. So a lot of times companies address the product really well. They develop a really great product, but they're not very good at manufacturing, or they're not very good at the distribution, right? How do I get this in the hands of customers? How do I support it? How do I sell and market? And we have just really done really well with that. And the other thing I'd say is, from the very beginning, I wasn't part of the team that founded the company. I came about a year later. They had this vision for this remote controlled robot and then an autonomous robot. And they had the foresight to realize that the autonomous project would take a lot of years and require a lot of money. Let's develop the remote robot first, because we can get that in the market within a year, and that'll generate the capital we need and the funding to fund this autonomous robot that isn't going to generate any revenue. So both products have been received, very, very, very well in the market, and really because they solve great problems. And what I found over the years is a business that's built around solving a problem, whatever it is, if you solve it, you tend to do very well. So the first product, the remote one, is we're really building a brand new market. There isn't, I would say 80-90% of our buyers didn't even know the category existed, right? It's kind of like selling a smartphone in the 90s, right? It didn't exist, and we take it for granted today. But there was a time when nobody knew what it was or why we should even have one. And the problems that product is solving is when you're mowing an extreme landscape without our product, if you're using traditional equipment, it's unsafe in many cases. And there's many documented injuries across the United States and the world on an ongoing basis because of people pushing equipment beyond its safe operating limits. But the other is they're doing the work by hand, and it's just very draining on resources, especially in recent years, because those are jobs that frankly don't pay well. They're horrible, outdoor, 100-degree temperature all day long. Nobody wants to do that. So that product has, for governments, been a great solution to either addressing safety or the labor issue, but also for contractors, it's been an economic value because they're adding high value niche revenue. On the autonomous product, we just introduced that in October. We don't actually have customers yet. We have some orders, but the first products ship to customers in May of 2023, so a few months away. But I'll tell you, the demand of people that want to speak to us, look at this product and try it and potentially make a buy is greater than any product I've ever marketed in my life. It's been a real struggle, which is a blessing to stay up with that demand. And I would say the reasons they're interested are very simple and very consistent across the board. Is they face a labor challenge. So in the lawn and landscape industry, if you interview CEOs, and I don't care if it's a 10-person company or 10,000 people, for the last 8 years, the number one challenge is labor. And it's not the cost of labor, it's labor availability. It's getting hundreds, if not thousands of workers out doing this work every day on time, sober. And it's a very real challenge. And one company just told me, actually two companies have told me in recent weeks, that they want to invest in autonomy today, not because they need it in 2023, but because they see the labor challenge getting worse in the next 3 to 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
And if they don't begin making investments now, it'll be too late and they'll get caught behind the 8 ball learning how to use this new technology. So I apologize for the long rant to your answer, but I tried to give you a balanced approach.
And did they give you any insight as to why they think the labor market's only going to get worse? Because, you know, one of the short-term thinking that we've had is, okay, we went through this pandemic, especially here in Canada, the government has given great incentives to help people get through it. But the flip side of that coin was it encouraged people to stay at home because they were receiving all this money and they were actually quite comfortable at home. Yeah. So we had this short-term kind of lack of momentum of people wanting to go to work. But what you're saying is, you know, some of the customers you're talking with, it's only going to get worse.
Yes. And I'm going to give you two answers. So they tell me that, yes, it's worse since the pandemic, but they've been dealing with these challenges before the pandemic.
Okay.
And I am no economics expert, but I'll tell you, I read somebody recently that said in America, and I would think this data parallels Canada very closely, that the baby boomers peaked in 2019, and so retirements, they're leaving the workforce. Yeah. And the other thing that's unique about the baby boomers, it is the most significant generation statistically where both the man and the woman are working, and their children, the Gen Xers, are increasingly saying, some of us, our careers aren't the number one thing. We're going to work a little less, or maybe just have a single worker in the family instead of two. And there's simply fewer workers. And this person that I read, he said right now his view is that the United States is short 400,000 to 500,000 workers, and that he expects I know we're getting way off topic for the subject of robots, but he expects that in 4 to 5 years, the shortage of workers will be 900,000 to 1 million people.
Wow.
So I think I am convinced that we're in a multi-year shortage of workers here.
That's interesting. You know, and it's not going too far off topic because that's why we're here with robotics, and that's
Solving
what drives our
problems.
industry forward, is to, like you said, solve problems. So tell me about, so you have two products. You have the remote controlled robot and you have the autonomous.
Yes.
Now, when I hear you say that, I don't believe they're mowing the same lawns. So what is,
Correct.
explain a little bit about the differences.
Absolutely.
Of what you need to be autonomous versus when is the remote appropriate?
So the only two things those products have in common is you use the word mower to explain it, and they're made by RC Mowers. Other than that, they have nothing in common. So the remote is really for mowing ugly areas. So you're in Quebec, right?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm no expert in Quebec, but I've been around quite a bit. Love Montreal, very much so, and Quebec City. So think of alongside overpasses, the steep sides, right? And sometimes governments want to mow them so they look pretty. They're touristy areas. Sometimes in northern climates, they're maintained or mowed to prevent snow drifting. The reason doesn't really matter, but those are too steep to mow with a traditional lawnmower. And so they either do it by hand or they don't do it. So our product is that solution, but you don't need to mow it every week. You're mowing it once or twice a year. You're just knocking it down. Or many times in North America, there's a city or a region that's plagued by flooding, right? And the government will come in and build dikes and levees around cities or populations to prevent flooding. And when those projects are turned over to local officials, they're often required to mow that area twice per year to stop trees from growing, because if the trees grow, it weakens the integrity of that project. So, and the third example I'll give you is retention ponds. Today, anytime you build a large piece of property like a housing development or a commercial project, you have to think about how you're going to deal with the water. So you have giant parking lots or rooftops. That water's got to go somewhere because it can't just go into the ground anymore because we have a road or a roof over it. And one of the solutions, not only are there earthen waterways, but there's also what are called retention ponds. If there's a lot of rain, we run the rain into the pond and it doesn't flood anybody. The banks of those ponds need to be mowed the same reason that the levees do. So they're only mowed a few times a year. So it's tall, brushy. Oftentimes in America, in southern climates, there'll be snakes or alligators. I don't want to be around that stuff. The autonomous product is really the opposite. It's a turf mower. Right. It's used to mow. I'll tell you some of the places I've just been at recently showing people, universities, or I was just recently in Florida in a 1,000-home HOA, and they have all kinds of ponds and parks. And the landscape company that mows those areas wants to use our product in that environment. Or large factories, or I recently was at a 1,500-acre prison in Tennessee. And these are large areas where it takes lots of machines and lots of people, and we can put in autonomy and do the same work with fewer people. So they're completely different applications, really.
Yeah. And for the autonomous, does it have to be fairly level, or can you have some grading to the
yes,
the landscape?
You can have grading. If it's something a human would mow with traditional equipment, generally the autonomous product can do it.
Okay. A lot of the indoor autonomous robots in a factory, for example, they have fun with ramps and those type of things. So that's why I asked the question, how well
Yep.
does it?
No real issues. And if there's an issue with a grade, it would be so steep that it'd be unsafe for a human anyway, which means it's not suitable for this autonomous product today.
Okay. Now tell me a little bit about, so how does it work? First of all, the autonomous, is it, how does it map the field, and
Sure.
how does it, what kind of setup is there?
Great question. So it looks like a zero-turn mower, and it works like a zero-turn mower. So with no training, if you have experience with a product like that, you can get on it and use it. And when you're in the seat, autonomy is disabled, or you can't enable autonomy when you're in the seat. So if you're at an area and you want to mow it, you would just tell it that I want to record a plan. We just call it a mowing plan. And you quite simply mow the perimeter of the area, and you get off the mower and you deploy it with a couple buttons, and it'll go inside. It'll mow the area the most mathematically efficient manner. It drives itself using GPS and RTK, local corrections data.
Okay.
And then it remembers that plan. You can, in an app, you can give that plan a name, call it the Jones Factory Zone A, whatever you want to call it. And then when you come back to that area, it recognizes the plan, and it'll ask you if you want to change the pattern or the direction of the mow, and it'll just go do it again. And while it's mowing, the worker, can be picking up trash, can be string trimming, blowing grass off sidewalks, things that are not suitable for autonomy today, and maybe never will be. Right?
Interesting. So when you say when you come back, so that's like 1 week you mow the lawn, you set up your plan. 2 weeks later, you come back to mow the same area, and you don't need to do the setup again.
Exactly. Yep. It lives essentially in the cloud, and it's agnostic to which mower, right? So let's imagine you have 3 mowers, number 1, 2, and 3. Because you don't want just one, because then I'm not getting the benefit, right? If it's one person running one machine, there's not a significant amount of benefit. So I might record a plan with mower number 1, but I come back with mower number 2 in an area, and it doesn't matter. The plan lives with the owner of the machines, not the machine.
Okay.
So they'll deploy, say, mower number 2 in an area, and then mower number 1, mower number 3. They're all running, and then I go string trim around trees or sidewalks or whatever. So a few other things to know. Sometimes inside of the area you're mowing, there might be objects that we want to avoid. And we call those keep out areas. And so before you finish the mowing plan, it will ask if you'd like to identify a keep out area, like a tree, a water feature, landscaping. And it's the same thing. You just record around it. It'll stay away. It'll mow around it permanently into the future.
So when you say record around it, you're driving the mower around in that mode of keep out.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah.
What about an unplanned object? Let's say, I don't know, a dog runs in, or a person runs into the field.
It'll just stop.
Okay.
And it'll stop, it'll turn the blades off. And when if the person removes itself, then it'll resume.
It'll resume from there.
So, I'll give you an example. My kids would throw a ball in front of it, right? And you think of a ball traveling past it, it's pretty fast, right? Mm-hmm. So it sees it, slows, doesn't come to a stop, because before it's even stopped, the object has cleared itself. So then it resumes. On the other hand, if you walk, in its path, it'll just literally stop, and it won't move until you clear it. Another thing that might happen is you might have a very large property, and you've been there many times. You stop, you unload the machines, deploy them. But since you were there last, there was a big storm and a tree fell or a branch fell, and it's in an area that you can't see at the moment. And you deploy the machines and you're doing something else, and it comes across this tree branch, it will stop and alert you on your phone, on your app.
Okay.
And it'll tell you that, there's an object and I need instructions, or you have to clear it or something like that.
Okay. Now, I guess it is a new product, so maybe you don't have much data on my next question. I was to say, do people normally lease these, or do they buy them, or is it a mix of both?
So we sell them. They're priced at
Okay.
$64,000, $64,500. So call it $65,000. And then it costs $200 a month for the satellite, RTK, and cell service. And then,
Okay.
we put a security package on top of it. So, and that the first year is included with the purchase, but yes, they are purchased and owned by our customers. We're not offering a robot as a service or something like that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to take you back to the safety portion.
Yeah.
Because, I've had different, through my podcast, I've been able to chat with some different people in the agriculture industry. It's been quick to adopt, for example, I had a company, Nexus Robotics, on the podcast, and they developed weed picking robots.
Mm-hmm.
So these type of robots they're looking for any solutions, because like you said, nobody wants to work. Sometimes they're dangerous jobs to begin with, but then you flip the coin, and I had a couple of guys on from the Toronto area, and in Toronto on the sidewalks, they banned delivery robots.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a no-go. They didn't want robots. They felt it was a safety hazard, making the streets less accessible. How's been your experience with regulations and the safety, considering, the mower itself can be dangerous. Obviously, you've got some safeties around there to make sure that nobody gets hurt, but have you found any resistance from regulations or government or special interest groups of this type of solution?
So not yet, not yet, but I also think that, there's a famous company we all know, Tesla, and many others that are trying to deploy self-driving, and that's a different level of requirement because you're on roads with thousands of other people, right? And so while we're not void of danger, the early days, these products are going to be used in wide open areas with not many people. They stop. Now, could something go wrong? Of course, but the operator, this is not a set it and forget it. This isn't like your vacuum running in your living room right now while you and I are having this conversation. That thing's not going to kill anybody, right? It's not going to run anybody over. But our operator, we must stay within a visual range of the robots, and they carry an emergency stop on their body. So with one push of a button, they can stop everything. So not only is the machine equipped with LiDAR that senses objects that are a danger and will stop, there's a human there as a backup. So we just haven't experienced it yet, but our potential customers have told us very clearly, in order for this to work, it has to be safe. It can't hurt people or animals, vehicles, or buildings. So far we haven't had an accident or a mishap, but there's two sides of the safety, and we're fortunate. I think I'll back up. One of our founders, his name is Michael Brandt. He is the CEO of our company. He's an aviation engineer and spent much of his career in safety systems and crash dynamics. So designing something that while thinking about safety is kind of part of his DNA, and it cascaded through our company. That's a good thing. The negative, though, is when you have a robot that moves, the safer the systems, then the more sensitive they become, and they stop working when it's not dangerous.
Right.
And that can be a problem too, because if you are selling a product and you want it to mow this field, you want it to not stop. But if every time the wind blows a leaf in front of it and it thinks it is dangerous, it stops and then resumes, and then another, a bird flies by and it stops, right? So there's a double-edged sword, and we're trying to find that balance without ever compromising safety. But your question of any authorities, no, not yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look, they're not looking at companies like us. Not only are we small, but we're not driving down the sidewalk delivering packages. That's very visual.
Yeah. The number of potential interactions with people is much lower in your scenario.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, I suspect our biggest safety hazard is not actually the machine, it's rubber necking looky loose.
Yeah.
And I've seen it on multiple occasions. So first of all, with the remote product, people are driving on the road and they see it working on a hillside and there's no human on it and they've never seen anything like it and they're not paying attention.
Sure.
And I recently was in a city park and there was a bike path running through, and there's two parts of that experience I'll share with you that are semi-funny, but not. One guy was craning his neck so much on his bike, he drove off the bike path and crashed and fell off the bike. Now, fortunately, he wasn't hurt, but it's because he's watching these robots.
Yeah.
And then you as a robot enthusiast, you'll appreciate, one woman came up to me and said, "Are those robots?" I said, "No, ma'am. Our employees are invisible." I couldn't help it.
Did she have a sense of humor?
She looked at me like I was crazy.
It's a good one. I'm also a cycling enthusiast, and I've seen one of those, not one of yours, but the hobbyist version or the home version of a autonomous robot mowing the lawn. And sure enough, you do crane your neck and take a look. It's an interesting thing to see. It's much different than seeing a vacuum running around, considering there's a blade whirling around and stuff like that. So it's an impressive thing.
I think the other thing is you and I are working in an area where, we're kind of on the bleeding edge of new things, right? The masses always oppose innovation. Okay. There was a time when we got around primarily using horses and automobiles came to be, and there was all kinds of people that were opposed to that, right?
Yeah.
And even in my lifetime, going from a telephone to a phone in the house without a cord to now a cell phone, and we're going to get cancer and die, and just all these negative things. And I'm not saying it's all positive, but there's no shortage of people that find a reason to fear your innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the manufacturing space where I spend most of my time, robotics have been around for 50 years. So that's something that manufacturing has gotten good at, understanding, what is a safe zone. And we spend a lot of time trying to control the environment. But now that we're letting the robots out of their cages, that's changing, the paradigm a little bit. So there's new standards coming out for manufacturing and how to deal with that in a workspace. But, into these new environments that people are not used to regulating, moving equipment and stuff like that. So it's creating new discussions and new conversations, which one by one we'll have to tackle.
Yeah, and I think I've experienced similar things. You think of a robotic welder, that really isn't that new at all.
Yeah.
And you're right about it being controlled. Often the factories I've been in, there's a line, and if you cross it and break the beam, the machine stops.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're going to have a robot that cleans the floor or moves palleted material around, there's no beam, right? Unless it's on the machine, then it's a moving beam, right?
That's right. Yeah. 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 It has to be more adaptive, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So what do you see moving forward here? So you've got your first deliveries in May.
Yeah.
For you, what do you see as the future of robotics and where you guys want to go with this?
So I'll put it in context for our industry, right? Let's just look at the lawn and landscape industry. In 2022, I believe there was approximately 385,000 commercial mowers that were purchased. That number will probably be 400,000 this year. And so that's $4.5 billion in revenue. If we convert all of those to autonomous robots, it's probably a $20 billion opportunity. So I think the opportunity is really, really large. And then if you look at the space, there's maybe 20, 25 companies that make commercial mowing equipment across the United States today. So it's a little bit fragmented. Some of them are working on autonomy.
Okay.
Some have made significant investments, but also there's companies I know intimately that are very large that have made literally no investments in autonomy.
Right.
Now, and then there's also many companies like us, small startups, and I don't know, maybe we're not a startup anymore. We just built a new factory. We have 50 employees. At some point, you're just a business,
Yeah.
But there's plenty of startups that have 1,000 people as well. But there's many small entrants into the space as well. The problem's not going to go away. Okay. So that it really simply in the lawn and landscape space, will labor continue to be a challenge out 5, 10, 20 years? I'm going to say yes. Mm-hmm. Number two, can we create products that can solve that problem? I think yes. Will we be a player? Yes. If you run one of these large companies that builds and sells lots of products in today's world, every machine we sell takes one away from them. So at some point, these people that are not in it are going to be forced to get in it. Yeah. So I honestly think there's going to be a tremendous amount of disruption.
Yeah.
And that's such a buzzword. I hate even saying it. It's kind of like the word strategy. It's overused so much that it doesn't mean anything. But I suspect if you were to look at the top 5 or 6 players in the space today, I'll bet you 1 or 2 of them are either unrecognizable in 10 years or they're disappeared. Sure. And there'll be somebody that's in the 10th or 15th place that is in the top 5 in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
I think we have a really good product, and I think we're on a good path. I don't think it's going to be a hockey stick growth until we're out 3 years. So there's one company I'm working with right now that buys 500 mowers per year. And they told me that their goal is to be purchasing 200 autonomous machines within 36 months per year. Okay. But they're going to start with 3 or 5 or 10. Make sure that the product lives up to its promises, that it can do the work efficiently. Make sure that our company lives up to our promises, that will support them when they fail or they need help. And then they'll deploy more the next year and more the year after. And then I think by year 3, management will make a strategic decision to say, this is where we're heading, and a certain percentage of our fleet will be autonomous. So I think you'll see small spurts of companies like us grow and make announcements in the next 2 to 3 years, but it'll be year 4 from now when you're going to see massive, massive growth, and you'll see acquisitions of companies.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because I think listening to you talk, and when you start to think about what does it take to build an autonomous mower, and that technology package, when I think about, some of the agricultural applications. Not, you could potentially take that and apply it to different scales of equipment as well too. So that could be as you get really good at mowing, and you reach a certain point in the company's life cycle, there's many more applications you could potentially add on that could leverage your technology as well too.
Yeah, you are not wrong. There are other businesses. Honestly, there's some that exist today that we don't even know
think about. Yeah, sure.
You could deploy the same technology and be very successful. But I'll tell you, you probably know this, but it's what we're doing is hard, and it's not just the technological hurdle.
Yeah.
So many businesses think all they got to do is have a technological solution, and the business we're going to have to fight them off at the door. There's so many other things. The product has to look good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I've been around products that from an engineering perspective are awesome, but it looks like I built it in my garage. You can't sell 10,000 of those. It's not possible. It has to look attractive. It has to be familiar. Have you ever seen like sketches of super futuristic vehicles?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. They're attractive, but you never see them on the road. There's so few people that can handle it because it's too big of a departure, right, from what they're used to, right, in terms of the masses. So you build this machine, it solves a problem, but how are you going to find customers? And how are you going to get the product to them? And then who's going to support them? Like, how do you build that entire infrastructure? And we've been working on that 3 years. It's something nobody ever talks about. But without it, there's no way we could do this.
How much do you have to resist the thing that I just put on the table where you said, oh, you could do things outside of mowing? Like, how much discipline does it take to stay, like, is that a strategic thing for you guys to make sure you stay focused on?
Absolutely.
Mowing?
So on the one hand, I like to think of myself, and look, I don't run our business, that Michael does that. But I'm part of our executive team and I influence our decision making, but I can often be a negative Nelly because I say no to everything. I don't like it. Well, I'll just tell you some of the things that have been put on me, is in the dairy industry, apparently cows come in to eat and there's a stanchion or a fence and they push food away from them. And these facilities are so big that they have a human run up and down these long runs with a machine to push the food back to the cow. Okay. And they're wondering, gosh, could you do that with a robot? The answer is yes, right? Yeah. I've been asked to put snowplows on the front of robots and all kinds of things. All of it's great. Okay. And all of those are things that are technologically feasible. But what I ask myself, in our two markets, the remote controlled extreme slope mowing and the autonomous mowing, like, are we at a spot where my job to get revenue, we can't get new customers because we need new features? The answer is no. Like, we haven't even come close to seizing the opportunity. So we need to say no. And I'll tell you, one person that inspired me years ago is Tim Cook. He was being interviewed by Charlie, I don't even remember his name, PBS interviewer, and they're sitting at like a 5-foot round table. And Charlie asked him, Mr. Cook, what is the hardest part of your job? And without hesitation, he said, the hardest part of my job is editing. What do you mean? He said, all of our products fit on this table. And he said, every day I have to decide what we're not going to work on. He said, I remember in 2005 when we developed the iPhone and the iPad at the exact same time. And back then, I'm so proud of the fact that a company with our size and our resources, we had the discipline to say we can only do one. So we put the iPad on the shelf. We worked on the iPhone ruthlessly for 24 months. We deployed it. Once it was deployed, we went to the next product. Most companies I have worked at tries to do too many things at once. And I think even we do. But we've done a pretty good job of resisting those new things because, the other thing is it's really exciting to develop autonomy in this new product, and now it's out there. Now the rest of the work is boring. It's making it incrementally better. It's supporting your customers, but that we have to do the boring work, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very important.
Yeah. And we see that as well all the time too in our business where, because a robot, like you said, can do anything. And you brought up welding. Welding is the #1 robot application right now. They put about 100,000 new robots into the industrial market space. So when I sit down with customers and we talk about finishing systems or inspection systems, they say, okay, this is great. But just before we need to weld, can you do that too? And like you said, the answer is, of course, a robot can do that, but maybe we're not the right ones to do it. Right. And keeping that, what is the value you bring to the customers is a very important thing to keep in mind, and making sure that you're focused on that mission.
Yeah, I think when I'm presented with a new idea, I first ask, technically, can we do it? Yes or no? And then if it's a yes, you got to go to strategically, should we? Like, what's the economic reason to do it? And for me, the economic reason has to be, we have maximized our business opportunity with what we have. We can't grow. We can't get more customers. We can't get our customers to buy more. So we need a new market. We're not anywhere close to that. So I'm focused on what we have and nothing else.
Right on, right on. So next, well, we talked a little bit the next 4 to 5 years. In general, you've been around robotics for a couple of years now. What are some of the coolest things that you've seen? You can go outside of RC Mowers. Just what are some of the most interesting applications or problems that you think in a future life maybe you'd like to solve?
So our autonomous mowing robot would be in that bucket.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've personally been outdoors with executives of extremely large companies. And what I see over and over is what I just call the gape. They just stand there with their mouth open in absolute awe. So it's one thing for you and I to be on a podcast and talk about the idea of something. It's a whole nother thing to show up with a truck, unload machines, and they go do it, and they just work.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And on the one hand, if you know anything about basic technology, to think about building a machine that can use GPS and RTK to move around and LiDAR to stop from objects. I mean, if you think about that, that's not technologically, it's not going to the moon, right? It's not easy, but it's not going to the moon. But to actually see it work is, it's really pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It really is, and everybody that sees it is a little bit in awe. But beyond us and or what we could do, I probably can only answer it for us, and it's just because I'm so focused on us that I maybe have a little bit of blinders, but I think that our mowers will be able to mow residential level detail.
Okay.
In 5 years' time.
Okay.
The challenge, though, is when you put a human on a machine and there's debris, garbage, golf balls, you just stop and get off of it. Well, you can't do that if it's a robot. And so figuring out that challenge, because you can't have the machine keep stopping and having somebody go get it. So somehow the area is going to have to be cleared, or add a feature to the machine that it can clear itself. If you know what I mean? Because like imagine a child leaves a t-shirt in the grass.
Yeah, or a baseball glove or something like that.
Right. That has to be, you're either going to destroy it, hurt the mower, right? And none of those outcomes are good, or pick it up. And so, but I think we'll be able to, I don't think we can clear the debris, but we can handle the detail of residential mowing, which is small and compact, right?
Yeah, sure. And it's a tough challenge. I mean, the things that I've destroyed pushing my mower around, my kids have been upset with me a couple times, but I guess I should be upset with them for leaving it on the lawn.
Yeah, they don't learn though.
No. Great, Tim. Well, last question I've got for you is what do you do in your spare time when you're not?
Well, I have 5 children.
Oh,
So
you have 5. Wow. Okay.
yeah, so between work and family, honestly, I don't have a lot going on, but a few things. I love to read. So when I'm by myself, I love to read. My wife and I love to travel. And
Okay.
The third thing is once in a while, boating. In the summer, we're a
Boating.
boating family. Like every weekend we're boating if we're not traveling.
Okay. What's the latest trip that you've done? If you
Well,
got one that was great or one coming up?
Well, coming up, we're going to Cabo in Mexico in March, and actually next weekend we're going to Corpus Christi, which you might think, who goes to Corpus Christi? Well, my wife's parents are snowbirds and they're down there for the winter, and so we thought, well, we'll just take a weekend and fly down there and check it out.
Sounds great. This time of the year, I start to feel that I need to get out of. Us Canadians, we love to be snowbirds, but we booked our summer vacation for this. We're going to hit Spain, but it'll be in June. So I have to be patient and wait for my rays of sunshine till then.
So how's the snow where you're at? Do you have a lot of snow on the ground?
It's been a mild winter so far. Normally, and I'm not great with Fahrenheit, but normally in Celsius, January, February, we're like -20.
Yep.
So we have maybe a meter of snow right now, and it's right around the freezing mark. So it's been pretty, like, it'll melt a bit and then, go -10.
So that's similar to us. We have maybe a little more than a meter of snow on the ground.
Okay.
We've been a little colder than freezing, so Celsius maybe -10 generally. We haven't had many warm-ups at all.
Okay.
So we're ready for winter to go.
Sounds like you're ready for autonomous snowblowing too.
Well, that's the great thing with my job, though, is because we have mowing products. Last week I was in Orlando for work.
Okay. To get your ray of sunshines.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, Tim, really appreciate your time. It's been fascinating to hear about RC Mowers and your what you get into. We'll have to do this again in a year once you got those products out in the market and hear how things are going.
I would love to. I hope your readers find our conversation interesting.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
So this concludes the episode of Robotics for All podcast by AV&R. If you don't want to miss another single episode, don't forget to subscribe to our show in your favorite podcast app. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll talk again soon.